The World Cup officially starts today. That means that 5 billion people are about to stop everything that they're doing to tune in to this moment. Now, one Christian organization saw this moment for what it was, the greatest evangelism opportunity in human history. That's right, Crew created the Victory Beyond the Cup advertising campaign. This is why the current story that they've got is not doing that brilliant idea justice, and what I would do to change it. So let's get started. Here we are on the website for Victory Beyond the Cup. Now, the first thing that your eye is going to notice when you come to a website is what we call the hero image. And in this case, we see a generic stadium. I don't know if this is soccer. I don't know if this is football. I don't know if this is the Olympics. I'm kind of confused about what sporting event we're talking about. So there's a miss there. Second thing you're going to notice and tune into is the headline. And now here they've chosen a font that is a little bit smushed, which I think is a little bit difficult to read. But let's read the words. Turn the world's most watched sporting event into a moment that matters. So the obvious question is, why don't they just say World Cup? Well, the reason is because FIFA would come after them. So they can't say World Cup. So they're dancing around that idea. Okay. The fact that they have a generic stadium doesn't help cluing people into what sport we're talking about. Okay. So it's very confusing, the first half of this headline. The second half is also confusing. Into a moment that matters. What on earth does that mean? When I'm hangry, dinner is a moment that matters. When I'm on a cross-country trip, stopping at a Buc-ee's is a moment that matters. So what does that mean? It's very confusing. The next thing that we're going to be looking at is the sub-headline, okay? Now we're getting a bit of color. Victory Beyond the Cup equips churches, leaders, and everyday believers to use the world's biggest soccer moment to build relationships, spark meaningful conversations, and share lasting hope. The first thing that I notice here is we're trying to talk to multiple audiences, churches, leaders, everyday believers. In most instances, when you try to do that, you muddle your message because the actual message that you need to communicate to each one of those groups is a bit unique. And I think that's what's happening on this campaign. The next thing that I notice here is that they're very generic, once again, about the goal. Build relationships, spark meaningful conversations, and share lasting hope. Sounds good, but it sounds complex and it's not super clear. The last thing that they're missing is urgency. Why do I need to take action right now? Now, the fourth thing that you're typically going to notice on a website is a video. And they actually have a great video, but it's buried below the fold, which means that you can't see it when you first come to the website. Now, that is a huge miss because oftentimes that is the best conversion tool that you've got. If you put that above the fold where people can see it right away, you can increase your conversion rate up to 80%. So that's a big miss. The final thing that I see here is the call to action. Get my free host kit. Good thing is it's a green color, so it pops, so that's good. Second good thing I see here is that it's free, okay, so that's good. But host kit sounds like work, okay? I don't need work. I have 3 kids. I have a business. I don't need more work. Hosting sounds like work, all right? And that adds more friction to the conversion, okay? So these are a few things that are really, really critical and I think significantly impacting the impacts they could be having, all right? But let's try to actually quantify what this is. We've created a concept called the mission tax, and the mission tax is simply the delta between the impact you're actually having today and the impact you could be having if your organization was operating on all cylinders. Put simply, how much impact is Crew losing right now? Now, to be clear, we don't have insight into the actual numbers, so we're going to be doing some estimations. But the first thing is that we actually look at the website traffic, and we see that actual traffic from March through May. And so I would estimate the total visits for this campaign will be between 2.5 and 3 million visitors, okay? But not all of those people are going to pay attention to the content. In fact, 61% of them are bouncing off the site, which means that there's only 1.2 million that are beginning to truly engage with the content. That's a big miss, all right? Now, not all of those are going to sign up for one of their host kits, okay? I would estimate, based on the language that they're using, that they have about an 8% conversion rate. Not great. If that were the case, they would successfully have about 94,000 kits. Their stated goal for this campaign is 100,000 kits plus 10,000 churches engaged. Okay, so I think that they might be close to that number depending upon what the actual conversion rate is. But the key importance and the key difference here is that a dialed in campaign like this, especially for something that's free, should have a conversion rate that is above 20%. Okay, now if they were able to do that, they would have 236,000 kits that would be sent to people's doors. All right. So that means that roughly 150,000 kits are on the table. They could more than double their impact if they were able to dial in the story. So what would we do to be able to optimize this story? Now, before I get into that, I want to share a really important concept from the greatest communicator of all time, which is Jesus. Jesus was a master at taking complex ideas, distilling them into a very memorable and easily understandable concept. Let me give you a couple of examples. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed. Brilliant. You are the light of the world. Again, complex idea, distilling it into a really powerful and memorable concept. I think there's two ways that Cru could take what they're doing, which again is a brilliant idea, and distill it like Jesus has done. The first is the idea of sports evangelism. They talk all around the idea, but I think that idea in and of itself would help people, especially in the video content, to understand why they're doing this. The second idea is the faith seed. They are very muddy about what the actual goal of these conversations are. And I think that if you go to the parable of the sower, it's all about sowing seeds. And so we came up with this idea of faith seeds. And so keep those two ideas in your mind. Now let's actually go to a wireframe, which is a representation of how we would set up this landing page. First thing is the hero image. I would make sure that the hero image is more specifically about soccer, okay? Second thing is the headline. We opted for a little bit of math. Soccer plus Jesus equals eternity. We're doing several things here, giving context. Which sport? Who is this talking to? Believers. And then there's this element of eternity. It elicits curiosity, and it's what we call a pattern interrupt. Next thing is the subheadline. 5 billion people will watch the largest sporting event ever. Giving some context, dancing around the fact we can't say World Cup. Next, together we can plant 5 million faith seeds before the final whistle. Together, this is movement language. Second, we have a very clear goal, 5 million. Third, we have that idea of faith seeds. That is easy. And finally, there's a level of urgency before the final whistle. This is probably the biggest thing that could make a change for them. And that is the fact that you simply move the video up above the fold. That's going to dramatically increase your conversions. And then finally, for the call to action, get my free faith seed kit. Okay. So I genuinely believe that if they made these changes, they could go from an estimated less than 10% conversion rate up to 20% or higher. Now, I want to be clear. My hat goes off to Cru. I think they've done incredible work. They saw the opportunity. I simply want to state the fact that I think there's a big delta between the impacts they could have had and the impact that they're actually having. So let's bring this back to you. This is not a Cru issue. This is across the board an issue with all mission-driven organizations that we work with and that I see that are out there. So what is the story problem that your organization has been ignoring? And what is the impact that you could be having, but you're not because you've been ignoring that problem? Let me know in the comments.